Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Enterprise Edge podcast. My name is Mark Vigoroso, founder and CEO of the Enterprise Edge. I am very pleased today to be joined by Chris Stansbury. He's the president and CFO at Lumen. Will be an interesting conversation. We spend a lot of time on this podcast talking with software companies and services companies and end users in the enterprise AI era. And this one is going to focus on networking and connectivity. And as for those of you who don't know, Lumen, as Chris will share, is a publicly traded company. It's about $12 billion global company. They're focused on connecting people, data, and applications. And in this era that we're in, they're positioning themselves as the trusted network infrastructure for the AI era, which we are all in. But before we get into any of that, please join me in welcoming Chris and giving him a proper welcome. Chris, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Great. Thank you. Well, good. Well, let's dive in. I mean, we have a lot to cover, and we'll start slow with some icebreakers, get to know you a little bit, Chris, and your journey, and then we'll get into the meat of the business that you're responsible for. You're a CFO, so we've got some interesting financial governance questions for you, but love to get your perspectives across the board. But let's start with, there's, if you look at what's happening now in the world of AI, specifically enterprise AI, a lot of people, observers, analysts, consultants, vendors, end users, they're looking at what we might call AI compute. They're looking at what NVIDIA is doing. They're looking at what OpenAI is doing. They're looking how Oracle is doubling down on data centers. They're looking at what's happening with the hyperscalers with intensity, right? And I'm curious, is it perception, or are people not talking enough about the network and connectivity? What's your thought there?
Yeah, it's actually something that's been of interest to us for some time, because if you go back a couple of years, it was about data center expansion, and then, oh my gosh, are there going to be enough GPUs? And then, oh my gosh, is there going to be enough electricity? And the network is now starting to come into play, because the reality is, while the headlines are about compute, AI is about data movement, right? If you think about agents and how they work, they're looking for the best, most relevant information in real time to engage with a customer, to run a factory, whatever it is. And networking historically has been really static, point to point. And with the explosion of AI, data is now proliferating, not just in quantity, but where it's located. None of us know where our data is located. Mm-hmm. So access and latency become a real issue. And so in our view, the network is starting to really come into focus, because it's the nervous system. It's not the brain, but it is the nervous system. And making sure the performance is there to maximize the ROI on AI, you got to have the right network. And we think that's our network.
Yeah, exactly. Another aspect of how the world views companies is, how the major rating agencies look at your stock and look at you, and based on my research, it looks like you're being viewed fairly favorably these days. And I'm curious how big of a deal that is from your seat as CFO. Is that a big deal? Is that a footnote? What's the story behind that? Maybe the story behind the story.
Yeah, it is a big deal, really, because of where we've come from. So, the management team that is running Lumen today has been there as long as a little over 4 years. That's me, or less. And when we arrived on scene, the company was really over-levered, had a significant amount of debt due, half of it due in 2027 at the time. And it was suffocating innovation. And if you think about, and frankly, it relates to your first question, if you think about why networking doesn't get talked about, is networking was always that boring thing in the background, and there wasn't innovation and there wasn't investment. And we saw an opportunity with AI to expand on that. So we did a lot of work. We restructured debt. We put the company in a stronger position. and these upgrades are really a message to the market, but also feedback to us that we've done the right things, and we've now got the company positioned really well to deliver a network for the AI economy.
Mm.
And I think the biggest proof points of that are what we did with the hyperscalers to build out their networks, and then also the recently announced intent to acquire a company called Alkira. And I know we'll get into that,
Yeah.
but really it's about making the network accessible and being able to move data from anywhere to anywhere. And these ratings basically give us the permission and the juice to go do that. It's a validation that the strategy's right and that we've got the company in the right place.
That's great. That's great. Well, you mentioned a couple good segues, Chris. We'll start on the hyperscaler side. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about some of the agreements that you now have in place with those guys. I think everyone knows, it's sort of like there's the big three and then there's some others, but ultimately the big guys and then some others that are emerging, but multiple billion-dollar agreements that they're signing with you guys to help move that data as you talk about, right? And I'm curious about, number one is just what is it? What were those deals? How significant do you perceive them to be to Lumen as well as to the hyperscalers? And then also, what are the takeaways, right, for other players in the ecosystem, whether they're end users that are trying to navigate where and how to invest to transform their businesses, whether they're software vendors or services vendors or integrators? What should they take away from the relationship between the hyperscalers and you with regards to the AI build out that's happening on a
Yeah.
macro level right now, right? Tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we've been really deep in this now for close to 3 years. And
Yep.
if we go back to some basics, the differentiated position that Lumen has historically had through acquisitions and M&A activity was really around conduit that has been laced all across the U.S. between cities, within cities. And a lot of that existed at a company called Level 3, which was one of the founding companies of Lumen. And at the time that that network was put into place, it was estimated that they would be pulling in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 strands of fiber through each duct of conduit. And that was really for the internet boom, which was a solution without a problem, right?
Mhm.
No one really knew where the internet was going to go. This is very different, and what we're finding is that with the advances in photonics and our relationship that we have with Corning, we're pulling as many as 1,728 fibers through each one of those conduit now.
Wow.
And so what happened is there was excess capacity, and the hyperscalers. It's an arms race. It's an arms race to see whose large language model is going to win the day. And we could sell the hyperscalers the one resource that they don't have, and that's time. They could have gone and replicated the network, but it would have taken much longer. It would have cost more, and they've got the financial resources to do that. But we can deploy it so much faster because of that footprint.
Yep.
And so that differentiation mattered. Those networks are still being built. They're using it for their own internal consumption and training. But now, where we're starting to see growth are things like the neo clouds, and that's obviously far beyond training. That's where we start to see more inference with enterprise customers, and the use case, and we're just getting started on that. So enterprise is figuring out where it works, where it doesn't work as well, it doesn't have as much economic value, and from here we grow. I think the important thing though is while we loved those deals and they certainly helped us recapitalize the company and put us in great standing, unto themselves, you're limited in terms of how much of a return you can drive because you're still talking about fiber and infrastructure. The
Yep.
unlock is when you put a digital layer on top of that. That's where
Yep.
this Alkira acquisition comes into play because now you can, through software and through a screen of glass, literally program your network to move data from anywhere to anywhere on demand. That's
Yeah.
unheard of in networking. So it's the combination of the two that really
Yeah.
excite us.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a second. It's a very interesting move, and um, it's just been the statement is intent to acquire. That hasn't been actually acquired yet. Is that right?
Correct. We're
Yep.
we're moving through the close process now. We expect
Got
to
it.
close early in the third quarter.
Got it. Got it. We'll get to that in a moment. The next sort of question I've got has to do with requirements in the AI age, right? If you think about a lot of the work, especially in agentic AI, where a lot of companies are expecting the most transformative impact from a business perspective, right? Where you actually have agents performing and executing work that previously had required a human, right? And so the workloads, AI driven or AI native or AI first workloads, they're not very forgiving, right? There's a lot of requirements in my observation with regards to latency and reliability and resilience and throughput that are pretty strict, pretty robust. And I'm curious, when you think about those demands coming from enterprise customers, how does Lumen anticipate and get ahead of that sort of high expectation, high level of demand from a performance perspective, and then competitively speaking, are you worried about alternative solutions out there that are either ahead or have a first mover advantage or whatever, however else you're characterizing those competitions? So it's kind of a two-part question. How are you thinking about and characterizing that elevated, if you call it elevated, demand from the end user world in the AI era? And then how do you think about this? Think about alternative solutions that these folks may be evaluating relative to what Lumen is capable of now.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yep.
AI does not work with latency.
Right.
And we are going to continue to be in search of that zero latency solution.
Mm-hmm.
Today, our network reaches 95% of US enterprise within 5 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and that'll continue to improve as we pull the most modern fiber, and then the equipment that powers that continues to get faster and faster. We're going to go from 400 to 800 to 1.6 terabyte kind of transmission speeds, and that obviously helps. And the best example that I can give, because we consider ourselves customer zero, is we have an agent that interfaces with customers around operations issues. So let's say there's an outage. You can text with an agent, and that agent is giving the customer responses to their questions in real time.
Yep.
That would not be a good experience if
Right.
it took 90 seconds for the agent to respond, right? And
Right. Right.
and the hurdles, as we talked earlier, are only getting higher as that data gets further and further away, right? It's in search
Mm-hmm.
of power and cooler temperatures. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the puzzle that has to be solved. On the
Mm.
competitive front, it's a really interesting transformation that's starting in the industry because historically, just like the way we started our conversation, networking was always there. It was always the last thing to consider, and it was heavily commoditized. And so the selling motion was very much one between the carrier and a procurement department. And every 3 years, when a contract came up for renewal, it was about how much is the price going to fall. And a point of evidence around that is that that physical connectivity between 2 points, network engineers would refer to as north-south traffic. The data that is consumed every year is growing significantly, but the market TAM, is only growing at 1% because of
Yeah.
price deflation.
Yep.
The value is in that east-west traffic where you're moving workloads between clouds and DCs, et cetera. And that's where the software comes in. So from a competitive standpoint, we actually believe we are the first mover. And the way we've positioned ourselves to be ready for that is that as we've been pulling fiber for the hyperscalers, we're also expanding our own footprint for resale to enterprise. And you'll hear us talk about things like rapid routes, which are on demand, ready to go for 100 and 400 gig waves. So instant on connectivity with an enormous amount of capacity. And we've also been expanding our metro capabilities and capacity. So we're
Hmm.
ready for it. And now with the software, we think it changes a lot of things.
Well, great. That's a good segue. I mean, we've teased it a few times. Very curious for a little context on the Alkira acquisition. I've done some research, but I can't claim to understand all of the thesis behind it, but would love to hear maybe just basic thumbnail on who Alkira is, why does it make sense for Lumen to acquire them, and then what does it mean for your business going forward from a, let's just say, from a revenue, from a cost, from a customer experience. Talk to me about the actual impact on the business that you foresee.
Yeah, Alkira is directly in line with the strategy that we laid out at our investor day back in February.
Mhm.
But what it does is it accelerates our journey by a couple of years because we were able to acquire rather than build. And the strategy, quite simply, think of it as a three-layered cake. And at the bottom is that physical network that we've talked about. In the middle, you've got a programmable network. And that's obviously done through software. And then the top layer is ecosystem partners, where tech partners are building APIs into the network because it makes their product performance and customer service better. But that middle layer, Alkira, it's a great story. The founders actually did this once before. They sold the company. The acquirer didn't do anything with it, and so they went and started the company again. And we've acquired it this time, and we're so excited to have them as part of the strategy. We're actually going to integrate our innovation engine into Alkira rather than the other way around.
Okay.
Because what they've built is really the control plane for the network. It really is that one pane of glass where you can move data from anywhere to anywhere, but the combination with our infrastructure is what matters. And the reason is we have direct cloud on ramps. You don't have to go through a neutral third party carrier and pay toll charges and slow down your speeds. We have that direct access today. So you marry that direct access with the big cloud providers with a programmable software control plane layer. And now you've got something enormously powerful where you can literally move stuff from one cloud to another cloud on demand as needed. And the response as we talk to the C-suite, not the procurement department anymore, about the kinds of solutions and problems this solves and what it does to the total cost of ownership. Because you're not going to be queuing data for as long. You're going to have a lot more flexibility. Your costs will come down. We're getting an enormous amount of interest. So can't wait to close the deal and really start delivering those solutions to customers.
And you're anticipating closing in Q3, you said this year, calendar year,
Yeah, early Q3. Yeah.
early Q3. That's great. That's great. And given the fact that the story becomes kind of a platform story, right, going forward, um, is it is there a I don't know how to say this without, well, is there sort of like an agentic or a semi-autonomous set of use cases? If you think about this as sort of a software driven
Absolutely.
network, there's some agentic use cases right within that environment, right? That could drive
Absolutely. I
multiple.
mean, it's
Yep.
we talk at investor conferences about, think about the value of a smart or a programmable network.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that you're not waiting for guys in trucks to run around and try to get connectivity between buildings, it's on demand.
Yep.
Think of this scenario. Here's the math that matters. We
Mm-hmm.
used to talk about, well, how much does connectivity cost, and what's my price per bit. The math that matters is a GPU cluster costs about $2,000 an hour to run. And you may be wanting to push some workloads through those GPUs. And so you're sending your data to a location to, to run through those GPUs. Well, what happens if everybody is sending their information on the same data, Virginia, and Virginia, those GPUs are either at capacity or layer in additional complexity. There's a limit on how much energy is available, and so they're dialing those GPUs down. Now you have data that is sitting in a traffic jam, waiting to be processed. Well, what does a smart network do? It sees it and says, "Hey, you know what? There's GPU capacity in North Dakota right now.
Yep.
I'm just going to move it there," because you really don't care where it's being processed.
Right.
You care that it is being processed. And that time value relationship is really what matters to the total cost of ownership. And so
Right.
that's where that agentic layer, that programmed network, can really transform businesses and industries. And it's about time that the network
Yeah.
brought some innovation to the marketplace.
Yeah, no question. I mean, software-defined networking is by itself is not a new thing, right?
Right.
But so tell me how novel you think this combination with Alkira is going to be through the eyes of your customers. How much of a head start does it give you, or gap does it give you? And is it uniquely different from what perhaps others or perhaps some know as software-defined networking? What's different about this?
What's different about this is that really through one pane of glass, you
Yep.
can reach everywhere because this is cloud agnostic,
Yep.
it's carrier agnostic,
Yep.
which by definition means it's a global solution.
Right.
So if I am the CTO of a large multinational bank and I want that compute environment to look the same everywhere globally, I
Yep.
can now deploy that. And
Yep.
and Lumen is the connectivity point into those clouds. Alkira is the software layer that allows you to orchestrate the way you want to orchestrate. But we
Mm.
can then set parameters with partner carriers to say, look, you've got to provide private connections.
Mm.
None of this can be over the public internet, and that's one of the big concerns right now. As more and more of this data is moving around the globe, is that it does end up on the public internet.
Yeah.
We can create those private connections so the security is there. There's less latency, all the things we've talked about, and it literally is everywhere. We actually have a demo that I saw the other day for the first time, and
Yep.
it's a customer's network map live, where a CTO can literally start to drag things around and create the connections they want to create, and that's just something that doesn't exist
That's
anywhere today.
exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting. That's great. And it sounds like you've already got pretty clear integration plans for post acquisition, which is great.
We do, and the energy right now is really around the go fast plan, which is what can we do between the time of close and the end of this fiscal year so that we hit the ground running in 2027 with a very aggressive plan, which ultimately pulls forward our ability to inflect revenue back to growth and do the things that we want to do. So this is we see the opportunity, and we played defense for a few years, and now we're playing offense, and it's
That's
fun to
exciting.
have the ball.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Congrats. Well, let's the time goes fast. We've got a few minutes left, Chris. We could probably talk for a lot longer just about that point alone, but let's shift gears and park that for maybe next time around. We'll talk in the fourth quarter or something. But a couple dismount questions here. A little dismount speed round here. When you think about where Lumen is developing a unique proposition, a unique selling proposition, as it were, the combination of fiber and cloud seems to be the rub. It seems to be the magic, and I'm not even sure if you could point to one or the other that is sort of more important. But would you say it's sort of the combination that is driving that go forward USP?
Absolutely. I mean, it
Yeah.
is both. Fiber gives us the scale, the reach, and the performance. and the cloud-like platform gives us the programmability on demand. And so the combination of the two is is uh, is the moat. It's really the
Yep.
combination of the two.
Got it. Now let's talk a little about metrics. You're a financial guy. We haven't talked a heck of a lot about metrics, so I'd love to understand. You guys are publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and I'm curious, are there metrics that you look at, sort of your short list, that maybe aren't the obvious ones that Wall Street wants to see, that everyone understands are required of a publicly traded company, that really indicate perhaps the story behind the story, maybe a leading indication of whether or not the strategy is actually materializing? And any thoughts on that? Any metrics that you think are that
Yeah,
you're using to drive insight?
yeah. I mean, there's the standard metrics, but when I think about the point in time that we're all operating in today with AI, it really comes down to measurements of how efficiently you can move data at scale.
Yep.
And we're starting to see things like time to first token, right? Or tokenomics, right?
Yeah.
Is the phrase of the day, and those things are real, and it's because um, with AI, the value isn't created where the compute sits. It's created by how the data moves quickly to run through those compute environments, and then
Yep.
ultimately extract what's in it back out. And so I think those parameters are going to be the leading indicators that matter. And just a bit of a comment on this. I think what the world is really beginning to see is that if you take a really lousy a legacy process and say, hey, I want you to run that lousy process for me, and I'm going to take humans out, and you, the machine, can do it.
Yep.
That can be a bridge, but it can't be the go forward. The
Right.
companies that are revolutionizing their innovation and ultimately becoming category leaders are the companies that are rewriting the process um, and using AI from day one in that process development. And so I think, and the data movement is a leading indicator in that. So I think it's the how, and it gets back to that total cost of ownership of AI rather than how much does 100 gig wave cost. We're having a different conversation today.
No, I like that. All right, so here's an opportunity. The first part of it is do you think that investors and observers, do they have any lagging or lingering misconceptions about Lumen as a company? And do you want to take an opportunity to reinforce how they should be looking at Lumen right now?
Yeah. So the good news is I think things are starting to change. But
Yeah.
look, the reality is that people consider Lumen broadly as a telco, and it's really anything but. Yes, there's the connectivity that matters, but um, this isn't that static telco with guys in trucks plugging things into other things, and you wait 3 months to get the connectivity that you need. This really is a platform company that's enabling and orchestrating connectivity for AI, and that that changes our growth profile. It puts us in that east-west motion in addition to north-south. I said earlier that north-south is growing at 1%. That east-west traffic is growing at 13, and the TAM is a global TAM, and it's like $58 billion. So it's a much bigger TAM with much richer margins, and so we shift ourselves from being access provider to being a solution provider, and in that the rewards can be reaped economically, and we're maniacally focused on that, and we have committed to margin expansion, reduced capital intensity, EBITDA growth, and ultimately revenue growth because of it, and we're going to do it.
That's awesome. You mentioned a comment before, Chris. You talked about playing offense instead of defense, but I have a question. It's sort of in that realm, which is if you were to pick a word that describes kind of where Lumen is at in its journey as a company, um, what would that word be? I mean, defense to offense. I like that. Anything you want to add to that?
Uh, it's about scale and repeatability
Okay.
because um, that's ultimately how this works. That's ultimately how we bring speed, right, to the solutions that we can bring to customers. And we've done the foundational work, but now it's about execution and expanding the platform at scale. And that's that maniacal focus that I mentioned.
It's great. Last one, Chris, and then we'll let you get back to the good work you and team are doing. We have a lot of CIOs and CTOs and COOs and even CFOs that listen to this podcast. And we touched on the elevated requirements for AI workloads around latency and resilience and things like that. And put on your sort of professorial hat for a moment and just leave people with a plain English explanation of what does an AI ready network, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. It means the network can move massive amounts of data
Hmm.
instantly, securely, reliably from anywhere to anywhere. And it has to be adaptable. And so our AI ready network can adapt in real time as workloads shift on demand across clouds and data centers and the edge. And so I guess if I were going to summarize it, I would say think of it this way. If your data can't move, your AI doesn't work. It's that simple.
Yep. Love it. That's a great note to end on. Chris, thank you so much. Appreciate your candor. And I know calendars are tight these days, but I appreciate you making the time. Really enjoyed it. Folks, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Enterprise Edge. This won't be the last time you hear about this topic. I think Chris has opened our eyes to some factors that really can't be ignored if you're responsible for, overall readiness, not just applications, deployment, storage, data, but also infrastructure and networking, right? It's all part of a build out that's happening, like I said, on a macro scale, but really interesting to hear this deep dive specifically on the network side. So I'll be watching for the finalization of the Alkira acquisition, Chris. Hopefully that goes well, as we all will. And thank you again for taking the time, and take care, everybody. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.